I guess I'm going to start because I didn't realize I was introducing myself. My name is Mark Stiving. I am a pricing expert, been in pricing for almost my entire life. In fact, I remember being 12 years old and going to the grocery store with my mom, and I would see prices that ended in nine, like 69, 99. You may have been there, you've seen that. And I always wondered, why do companies do that? Do they think we're stupid? After all, we all know 99 is really a dollar. 21 years later, I happened to be at UC Berkeley in a doctoral program in marketing. And I had a chance to play with scanner panel data. Now, this is the data that the grocery stores collect when you use your loyalty card. And we knew so much about the purchases that were going on, we were able to determine, does this 9 cent thing really work? And it turns out it does. I spent the next 3 years and even wrote a dissertation on 99 cents and why it works. By the way, the reason it works is because we're lazy subtractors. But I became addicted to understanding how it is that buyers perceive value and how buyers use price to make decisions. For the next 27 years, it's pretty much all I've worked on is pricing and trying to understand how people use price as they make their purchase decisions. It turns out there are two major areas where people make these purchase decisions. One is psychological aspects, and we'll call the 99 cent thing a psychological aspect. The other side is value, and value is really powerful. Value is the place where people are trading off money for real benefit. What are the things they're looking to get? And so what we're going to look at today, what we're going to talk about today are value journeys. How is it that your buyers are making a decision to buy your products? And in fact, what we're hoping to do is make it so that you're able to win more deals at higher prices by understanding value a little bit better. We're going to go through several different buyer's value journeys, learn how people make decisions, and hopefully you'll see yourself in there. How is it that you make decisions, and how is it that you collect information? And after you've gotten this information, how do you turn that into, here's where I'm going to trade money for a product? And when we think about value, value is a very hard term to define. Lots of people define it in different ways, but probably the easiest way, or the way we're going to define it today, is willingness to pay. And that just makes sense, because if I'm willing to pay you $20 for something, that means I value it at $20. And if I'm only willing to pay you 10, then I only value it at 10. So we're going to use willingness to pay as a great proxy for value. The other two things that are really important to note is, one, we all value things differently. No two people are the same. We have a hard time figuring out how much we value something, but there's no way you value it the same way I do. And different people value different things. So different features or capabilities you might have in your product, you've got different buyers that value those differently. As a quick example, I use Puffs tissues. I only use Puffs tissues. And if I were to ask you why I use Puffs tissues, you'd probably say something like, well, they're stronger, or they're softer, or they're moisturized. And these are all reasonable answers. However, they're not the reason I buy Puffs tissues. I buy Puffs because they fit inside my desk drawer. Now, if you're going to build a business around selling Puffs tissues, you're probably not advertising that, hey, these fit inside your desk drawer. But knowing that that's a reason that some people value your product, and making sure sales knows to look for it or ask about it, that may make all the difference. We want to understand how it is that our buyers value our products as we're making these decisions. Now, the problem we have is that salespeople rarely know what they're doing when it comes to valuing our products. Forrester gives us this great quote here. 62% of vendor salespeople are knowledgeable about their company and their products, but only 22% understand buyers' business issues and where they can help. If I could claim to have any superpower at all, it's the fact that I'm very good at helping companies understand how their customers perceive their value. And I set up an entire company just helping companies do that. But what we're going to talk about today is how is it that buyers are going to go from, or how are they going to use value to realize that they need to make a purchase. Today, we're going to use this thing we'll call a buyer's value journey. You're going to see that this ends up being a map where people are moving around or buyers are moving around on here. But we'll think of it as a 2x2 matrix because that's going to fit really well. And we'll start out by looking at the horizontal axis where we've put in will I and which one. First, buyers have to make a decision that say, will I buy something in this product category? When they're trying to make that decision, they're really answering questions like, is this a problem I should spend money on? Is this in my budget? Should I really spend my energy and effort resolving this one or do something else? Once somebody says, yes, I'm going to buy something in this product category, or I think I might, then they move on to making a which one decision. And the which one decision is comparing different alternatives. We're looking at competitive alternatives. We're looking at features. Now, what's really important to note is when buyers are making that will I decision, they're looking for different information than when they're making that which one decision. When they're making the will I decision, the information they want is, how is it that your product, or how is it that you're going to help me solve the problems that I have? When they're looking for the which one decision, they're looking for information about how is your product different than other people's products? How is your product better? What's the differentiation? Why should I buy yours over somebody else's? Another thing that's really important to note is when people are making that will I decision, they're not price sensitive. Price is not what's driving that decision, something else is. But when they're making the which one decision, suddenly price becomes really important. We're trading off features, but it's always for some price. Let's go through an example just for fun here, and we'll talk about a refrigerator. We'll do the refrigerator example through the whole session today. But in the world of refrigerators, let's say my guess is you're not in the market to buy a new refrigerator today. And so you haven't said yes to will I. You haven't said, yes, I'm going to go buy a new refrigerator. And that means you're not shopping for refrigerators. But what if you did say yes? What if your refrigerator started making noise and you're thinking, you know what, I think it's time to replace this thing. And so you're thinking, yeah, I should probably go buy a new refrigerator. Suddenly you switch and say, okay, now what am I going to go buy? Which version, what color, what features, what brand? There's lots of things that we can go look at as we start shopping for refrigerators. But the key for us as we go through this is to realize that there's two different things we care a lot about. We care a lot about the different information that people need when they're making a will I decision versus a which one decision. And we care about the price sensitivity. How much are they willing to pay based on those two different decisions? If we take a look at that other axis really has to do with our salespeople or our buyers' activity relative to our salespeople. And CEB was Corporate Executive Board. They sold out to Gartner. They had a quote that said 57% of the purchase decision is complete before a customer even calls a supplier. That means our buyers are doing a lot of the work on their own before they reach out to us. And that makes sense. We totally get that. To complete our value map then, what we're going to see is in the top half, these are people, activities, things that our buyers are going to do without our salespeople involved. And when we're in the bottom part, this is once our salespeople get involved. Now, I mentioned this is a map, and we're going to paint 3 different journeys on this map so that you can see 3 different ways that buyers may be going through here. And there could be others, but we're going to talk about the 3 that are really interesting and key for us to watch. But I want you to note that the 3 we're going to talk about are the analytical journey, the relationship journey, and the trust journey. Let's start with the analytical journey. This is probably the journey that you think almost all buyers go on. And so we'll do that first. It's the most common of all of the journeys. And so what typically happens is a buyer says, hey, I've got a problem. I think I ought to go shop around. Then they move to the right and they say, okay, now that I've decided I have one, let me go on the internet and do a bunch of research. Let me go figure out what the different alternatives and brands and features. And then after they've done a ton of research, they go to the store and they talk to a salesperson. Now, people do this because nobody wants to talk to a salesperson anyway, but eventually we figure out we have to, and now we're having that conversation with a salesperson. Buyers that go down this journey are the most price sensitive because they've done a lot of research on what are the different features and what are the different price points for each of those features. And they're really focused on making that strong decision that way. They're trying to drive this on their own. What we need to be thinking about if we're giving them information is information about how is our product different than the alternatives? What's the differentiation there, and why would that matter to a buyer? What's the value of our differentiation? Let's go back to the refrigerator example for just a second. In the world of the refrigerators, it's maybe that your refrigerator's making a lot of noise. You say, I'm going to go online. You start doing a ton of research. You find a bunch of brands. You say, yeah, I really like these few. And then you go to the local appliance store. You talk to some salesperson and they help you make a decision. Maybe you go to another store after that and talk to more salespeople, but you've done a lot of the work and you're trying to do all this legwork on your own. The truth is you don't really trust the salespeople, so you're doing all this. Now, this is in stark contrast to the next journey that we're going to use. And the next journey we're going to talk about is the relationship journey. In the relationship journey, once again, we start in that top left where we say, yes, I have a problem, and we realize that on our own. But instead of going out and doing a bunch of research on the internet, now what we do is we just go to the store and talk to a salesperson. And that's because we're too lazy to go do the work. We really didn't want to do it on our own or whatever reason. I'm going to go talk to a salesperson and let them teach me what I need to know. Now, if you happen to be that salesperson, because we're still in that will I bucket, if you happen to be that salesperson, you are so lucky because you have the chance to build a relationship with the client. You get to talk about the problem that they have and how they might best solve it and help them frame their thinking around buying a product like yours. And maybe we toss in a little bit of things that we do better than our competitors, but we never mention a competitor. We just talk about the things we do better and how important those might be. After the buyers talk to us for a little while, they say, thank you very much, I appreciate it. And then they go on and say, I need to go look at the alternatives. And they go to another store, they go look at some other brands, and they talk to some other salespeople. But the good news is, because they went through a relationship journey and they came to talk to us first, we built a relationship. They believe us. They are going to listen to what we had to say, probably more than what other people had to say, at least if we did our job well. So when we're in this relationship journey, we start out talking about what's the value of solving the problem you're trying to solve. And then if they come back to us after they've talked to the competitors, then we switch our conversation to here's how we're better than our competitors. Here's how we're different than our competitors. And this is why it's important to you. So let's go back to our refrigerator example for just a second. Maybe here's what happens is your refrigerator starts making noise. You don't feel like doing research. You go to the local appliance store. You're talking to a salesperson. He's incredibly helpful, and he tells you all the different possible answers that you could use to solve your problem. And you just really like the guy, but you'd feel guilty if you just bought it. So you said, look, I got to go shop around. So then you go to some other stores. But in the back of your mind, you're always thinking that guy was really helpful and he really knew what he was talking about. And I'm going to go back and buy from that guy. And eventually you probably do. Now let's contrast these two journeys with the most powerful of all the journeys. And that's called the trust journey. The trust journey is where buyers don't even look at a competitive alternative. They start out in that upper left-hand box. They say, yes, I have a problem. They go to the store. They talk to Joe at the appliance store. And Joe says, yeah, this is going to solve your problem really well. And they just buy it. What I love about buyers that are in the trust journey is they're not price sensitive. Price didn't drive that decision. Something else did. But what's really important for us to know is the information we have to be giving these buyers that are on a trust journey is all about the value of solving the problem. It has nothing to do with how our product compares to a competitive product. It's all about how do we help our buyer. When you think of a consultative sale, this is exactly what you're thinking about. This is what we think of when we think, how do I help my buyer be more and more successful? So we go back to our refrigerator example. And in our refrigerator example, it's very possible that your refrigerator's making noise. You go talk to a friend of yours. They say, oh, you got to go talk to Joe at the appliance store. So you go to see Joe at the appliance store, and they told you, your friend told you, oh man, Joe's honest. He's good. He's going to be really helpful. He'll take good care of you. So when you get done with Joe, you don't want to shop around. You don't want to waste your time. You're just like, yeah, Joe, I trust you. Go ahead. Let's buy this thing. And you bought it. The fact that you aren't price sensitive when you made that decision, you didn't shop around, you didn't say, am I getting the best price anywhere for that? Means not that they're going to gouge you, but they didn't have to give you a discount to win the deal. Or at least they didn't have to give you a big discount to win the deal. You are less price sensitive, which is really powerful. Now, it turns out that we come back to say, what's the information we need? The only thing we're talking about here is the value of solving the problem. In no way are we talking about how do we compete? How do we compare with competitive alternatives? And you might be thinking to yourself, yeah, but this just doesn't feel very common. How do I find these situations? And that's a great question. There are lots of times where this can arise. For example, we just went through one. So your friend refers you. And so you trust that salesperson. You don't have to go shop around. You also see something like a trust journey if someone's buying from you again. So they bought from you once before, they come back for repeat business. They don't have to buy from you. They don't have to go shop around. They already trust you. They like you. And so they're not price sensitive. We're just talking about the value of solving the problem. It's possible they're trying to buy an option of something they've already bought from you before, in which case they really can't go to a competitive alternative. But for you, this is good news because once again, they're not price sensitive. And we're talking about the value of solving the problem. And the last one is, what about subscriptions? It's very possible if you're in a subscription business that your buyers went through an analytical journey or they went through a relationship journey as they were making the decision on which they wanted to buy. But that was for the first month. The second month, the third month, the fourth month, they're making a trust decision, a trust journey. They're not comparing you to competitive alternatives anymore. And so they're no longer price sensitive. And just as a blatant plug, I just published my newest book, Win, Keep, Grow, How to Price and Package to Accelerate Your Subscription Business. So if you want to support that, feel free. And I almost feel guilty that I did that for you. So it turns out several years ago, I was teaching a company called Mueller. They make fire hydrants. And lots of companies make fire hydrants. And as I was teaching this class, there was a salesperson in the back of the room, and he goes, this doesn't make any sense to me because we always have a competitive alternative. There's always a competitor in the deals that we make. And his boss kind of nudged him a little bit and said, yeah, but what about Cincinnati? Didn't they just call you and place an order without asking for a bid or competitive bid? And he goes, yeah. And the point here is that we may not think these things happen, but they really do. And our job, my challenge to you, in fact, is going to be you want to make sure that you are looking for which of the journeys your buyers are on, being super clear about what's the information they need at the time. Are they looking for how do I solve the problem and what's the value of solving the problem? Or are they looking for what's the difference between my products and competitive products and what's the value of that differentiation? We need to be really clearly focused on that. Now, I'm going to open this up for questions here in just a second. But before I do, there's a question that I often get, and that is, how do we know what our customers value? Right? Go back to the Puffs example. How would I ever find out that people value the fact that Puffs fits in a desk drawer? And we offer something we call a value discovery workshop, where we get a cross-functional set of people inside your organization that probably have a good perspective or gut feel for what value means to your marketplace. And we're able to have deep conversations and deep debates and discussions so that we can start to phrase things and word things in ways that resonate with your buyers. So we can discover, or at least come up with hypotheses for what really is important to your customers. So at this point, I'm willing to open the floor to questions. Are there any questions? Sunir, thank you very much for the comment. That's an amazing insight. Catherine, thank you. Are there any questions? By the way, is anybody allowed to talk to me? Only via chat. Okay. Well, please ask me a question on anything in pricing. When do you suggest sending a proposal? I'll answer the question, Alex. Great question, by the way. I typically think of the answer to that is, when do I suggest giving a price? And the answer to that is always after the buyer understands value. Now, you'll notice when you go to a retail outlet and you're looking at a pair of Levi's or something, they've got a price right on it, but odds are good you already understand the value of Levi's, so it doesn't hurt that they're giving you the price right away. But if I want to give you the price of something else, and you've never bought it before, I want to make sure you understand the value of that before I actually give you the price, if at all possible. And the other answer, that when do I suggest giving out a proposal? If somebody sends you an RFP and you've not been involved in it at all, I wouldn't send out a proposal. It's just a waste of time. You're not going to win the deal anyway. So that's my recommendation. How much is my new book? David, great question. So the new book comes out in paperback October 5th, like $17.95. And if I learned this just the other day, I didn't know this. If you go to Amazon and pre-order the book, they will give you a digital copy. So they'll give you the Kindle version immediately. And then you'll get the book when it comes out anyway. So thank you, David, for asking that. Alex's, at what point in the buyer's journey? In the buyer's value journey that we discussed, I think the answer is still the same. It's at the point where I believe they understand value. Now, if they're in a relationship journey or an analytical journey, I'm okay giving price when we're still in those will I conversations, because we've already expressed the fact that the value of solving the problem is way higher than the price of my product. Now, I may have to revisit the price conversation after I know they go talk to a competitive alternative and they're coming back in to say, yeah, but this competitor is only charging this much. And now I have to have that conversation a little bit differently and talk about the value of my differentiation. Lydia, how do you map out discovery questions based on the insights you've shared? Do the discovery questions change based on the quadrant they're in? So the discovery questions are always going to be on the bottom because that's where we're involved. That's the salespeople that are involved. And the discovery questions absolutely change. What I would typically do when I document value for a client, we actually document value in two different ways. One way is the will I value. So what's the value of solving the problem? And the other way is the which one value. And that is what's the value of our product's differentiation relative to, and we actually have to do that for each competitor or each major competitor. And when I think about the discovery questions then, typically once I understand which of those two places that I'm in, are they making a will I decision or a which one decision, then the types of discovery questions I'm asking are around the places where I know that there's value. Because that way I can then lead it back into, oh, here's how that's valuable to your company, or I can present that in a much more elegant way than I just did. But it typically starts by understanding where your value really is, and then you have the ability to write those discovery questions much, much more clearly. Where are we? What about creating ROI calculators for Crystal? So, as a general rule, I like ROI calculators. They're better than nothing. Right? But you know what I like better than an ROI calculator is a value conversation. Because I may have, if I take a calculator in and I tell someone, see, you're going to get 10 times your money back, they don't really believe me. But if I have a value conversation and I just talk to them about business acumen and they do all those value calculations and they come up with the exact same number, now they believe it. So it's just different when they do it versus when I tell them what the answer is. So I highly recommend having value conversations as opposed to ROI calculators. What do you do in a situation where they honestly don't have the budget to match your price, but definitely see the value? So this is a negotiations conversation we can have, Michelle. In any negotiation, two things are true. A customer has a maximum willingness to pay. They may or may not know exactly what that is. And we should have a minimum willingness to accept. So we're not going to take any deal that's below this price. And there's lots of reasons why we might say that. It may just be that our costs are that high. So my recommendation is, if you have to, you're welcome to negotiate someplace in between this mess. But that's a decision that you as a company get to make. How much are we willing to negotiate? The ideal is that we want to try to understand how much value we're truly delivering to our customers and try to determine what their willingness to pay is so we can capture as much of that as possible. Now, before you guys leave, I want to end with one last story real fast. Every year I get to go to the Reno Rodeo. And I love going to the rodeo. It's a lot of fun for many reasons. It's just kind of like down to earth people. It's fun. But they always have this pavilion where they're selling things. And several years ago, I was in the pavilion and there was a company selling a pellet-fed smoker. Now, I've been smoking meats for quite a while, and I had this Cook Shack smoker, and it looks like a refrigerator. You put a few wood pellets in, and it gives a little bit of smoke flavor, and it was interesting, but I didn't think it gave enough smoke flavor. I never got that beautiful smoke ring you see on TV when people smoke, and I didn't think the temperature was being held at a constant enough temperature. So I stopped in and talked to these guys, and it was fascinating because they were telling me all these things, like it gives a beautiful smoke ring and it holds the temperature really well, and it's cooking with smoke. It's cooking with the heat from the wood, not from some electric heat. And you don't have to babysit it. It's going to hold the temperature. And I'm just like, oh, this is what I need. I need this badly. And the guy says to me towards the end of the conversation, he goes, and this is just as good as a Traeger, only half the price. And I said, well, what's a Traeger? And they said, oh, it's just another vendor of these wood-fed smokers. And so then I said, well, okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm gonna go think about it, and I'll let you know. And you know exactly what I did. I went home, I looked up Traeger online, and guess what? I bought a Traeger. Of course I did. Now, I might have bought one from this guy because I didn't know a Traeger even existed. He was solving my problems. He was doing a fantastic job. I was essentially going to be on a trust journey, but he forced me to go talk about or think about my competition. So my recommendation to you, strong recommendation to you, always assume your buyer is on a trust journey until you know otherwise. If you only remember one thing from today's presentation, remember this. There is no competition until our customer brings them up. I'm Mark Stiving. Now, go make an impact. And I'll assume there's wild